Chapter 486, Last Tribute. "You can't win," Godfrey said. The thought of killing Ken did a lot of damage to his already unstable mind, and all of that rage was directed at Mrs. Fukushima. "You don't know that. You're strong, but so am I." Ken drew his katana. Asahi descended from his mount and drew his own katana. "I'll be fighting with my all. I've never had to go all out. I've never truly known my limits since all I've learnt is restraint. Will you be able to bear it?" Godfrey held his longsword, its tip facing the sky as he spread his legs to support his stance. Ken surpassed him in agility and reaction speed, and he would definitely move around faster than him, who donned Imperial. Imperial wasn't exactly light. "Let's find out," he said. "This is my last tribute." Ken shot forward. He was like a blur. In the next instant he was above Godfrey, swinging his katana downward. Meanwhile Asahi charged, unleashing a horizontal slash. Godfrey knew his armor would protect him from their slashes. There was no way, no matter how powerful Ken's katana was, that it could pierce the immortal armor, but the blunt impact of that blow could affect him. Knowing this, Godfrey unleashed a telekinetic pulse. It surged outward. Negate. Asahi activated his innate skill. Ken copied it, negating the telekinetic surge. Ken flew backwards since he wasn't powerful enough to completely negate the surge. He crashed into a building, but Asahi was still on the move. Somewhere before his katana touched Godfrey's armor, he tilted the blade downward, and fire surged as if he had lit a matchstick. Asahi jammed his hand downward, his elbow grazing Godfrey's side as he slid to a stop right behind Godfrey, then swung his katana. Sparks, accompanied by a loud clang, echoed throughout the settlement as his katana slammed into the armor. The rebound made Asahi stumble backward. Godfrey took advantage of that. He twisted one foot to his side, pivoting his torso, then swung his longsword in a wide horizontal slash. It unleashed a golden wave crackling with lightning, but Ken intercepted the blow with an upward swing. He dug his toe into the ground, yet slid over 100 feet. "Your armor, I've seen nothing like it." Ken's eyes narrowed. "Thank you," Imperial replied smugly. "Those eyes, he's already contemplating how to bypass you. Ken is no fool. In fact, he's smart enough that my life could be at stake here." Asahi and Ken looked at each other, then brandished their swords, which were billowing with fire. There was an explosion. Both samurai, master and student, were upon Godfrey, who swung his sword at Asahi and unleashed a telekinetic pulse, but Asahi and Ken switched places. Asahi negated the pulse, while Ken blocked his slash. Godfrey knew Ken didn't even bother contesting strength with him as the katana tilted straight for the ground. A dagger, on the other hand, jammed into his side. Asahi took that opportunity to unleash a wide slash across his chest. Godfrey refused to fall back. Instead, he lunged forward, slamming his left gauntleted hand into Asahi's helm. The blow disoriented the samurai, forcing blood from his lips as his mask flew away. Then Godfrey, still in the same motion, swung his foot at Ken. Ken forced himself down while swinging his katana upward to tilt Godfrey's leg up. His eyes widened. The katana broke against the force of Godfrey's armored leg. The broken pieces and Godfrey's golden foot reflected in Ken's irises. Fortunately, he evaded the kick, but slid right in front of Godfrey. Unfortunately for Godfrey, his body became painfully hot. Looking down, he discovered he was on fire. The fire from Ken's dagger and Asahi's slash didn't just fade away, but spread as though he was coated in fuel. It had to be an adaptive skill, suited for heavily armored individuals like him. Frost crept into his armor and dissipated into mist after the fire was gone. But Ken had already taken that chance to retreat. He fused with Asahi, who spread out his arms, exhaled heavily, then wrapped both hands firmly around the katana's long hilt. All of a sudden, crimson lightning flashed in the sky several times. Lightning danced on the surface of the katana's blade, then suddenly grew strong enough to even run along the samurai's body. Godfrey aimed the tip of his longsword at the samurai. Both of them shot forward at the same time. Their blades were supposed to clash, but Godfrey realized what he struck was an afterimage. All of a sudden, there were 6 Asahis all around them, all slicing downward at the same time. Godfrey vanished, then reappeared 10 feet away. He noticed crimson lightning running toward him. Swinging his sword, Godfrey sliced the lightning apart, assuming it was Asahi. It was supposed to be. But this lightning divided, and Ken plunged a dagger at his eye-hole, but Godfrey was fast enough to grab it. Golden lightning burst out of him, but Asahi negated it, spun, and slammed his foot into Godfrey's chest. The blow launched Godfrey through dozens of buildings, and he crashed into a cliff. It tore apart, boulders of different sizes crumbling from the top. Asahi began to unleash air mana slashes. They swept through the air, slicing the huge cliff until every part of it had fallen. Lowering his katana but still gripping it tightly, Asahi approached the hill. "I know you're not dead, Godfrey. A lot of people have tried to kill you and they haven't succeeded. That's enough for me to tell it's hard for you to die." Ken muttered inwardly. He watched through Asahi's eyes. When the samurai came close enough, he slammed his foot against the ground, and a powerful wind blew away most of the rocks at the top. Asahi's eyes settled on the golden armored figure, half sitting, half lying in the rubble as though he was resting on a throne. "Rise up, we haven't even started," Asahi's aged voice rang. The samurai held his katana in an offensive stance. "Very well then," Godfrey said. "Let's fight as demigods then." He rose from the rocks next. "I have always hated the system. It just never favored anything about me. The authorities, the government, manipulated by Cain or not, the system has never been fair to humanoid summoners, to the weak, not even to the strong." It seemed as if the island itself shook as his sword clashed with Asahi's katana. The samurai was thrown backward, but red lightning ran on the surface of Imperial, crackling with great intensity. Godfrey grunted, yet stood. "The unfairness of our world also caught up with you, Ken. You've been molded into a version you could have superseded, and for this I thank Cain. I don't know how he knew I wouldn't break, but I didn't. You did." He watched Asahi change his stance, and with a step, gusts of wind burst out of the ground. A great portion of mana leaked out of the black samurai, who took 3 normal steps forward, then blitzed toward him. Suddenly, Asahi transformed into a whirlwind of sword slashes, and wind so fierce everything in the settlement was leveled. Ravines were torn into the island from sword gashes that flew out of the whirlwind. Godfrey stood, staring at the whirlwind as mana beams slammed into his armor, pushing him back step by step. The earth around him was torn open. The depth of these thin holes was too deep to be seen. "How long will I let the heads act rampantly? I should be reasonable. I just stepped into the spotlight. Unfortunately, reason died in the Black Sea. All I see is the hand of an egoistical woman pulling the strings and forcing me into a corner. All I see." Suddenly, all the wind and sword slashes gathered into a gigantic crescent slash. With a grunt, Asahi swung downward. Godfrey leaned away. In the next instant, he felt a rumble, and a part of the island slowly began to tilt away from the other as the waves of the sea became restless. Wind blasted against his back. Asahi appeared behind him, swinging his katana, but Godfrey rolled forward, slammed his ironclad boot into the ground and thrust his longsword right back. Asahi gently averted it by grazing his katana against the longsword. Sparks flew as the katana drew closer to the hilt. Then Asahi's eyes lit up with a moonlike glow. "Moon stance." From within Asahi's eyes, Ken watched. He shut his eyes, muttering 2 words, "Last dance." The katana hit the longsword's hilt. Asahi pulled back, falling to his left, a sudden move that allowed him to evade Godfrey's forceful second thrust. Asahi slammed his palm into the ground, spun his legs like the blades of a fan, sweeping Godfrey's legs off the ground. "Will freeze. Will freeze." Both 40 demigods used will freeze on themselves at the same moment. Godfrey paused midair, his body angled in the direction he was falling, while Asahi paused. One hand on the ground, with his 2 feet still in the air. Godfrey's one eye met Asahi's moon-like eyes, then everything twisted. Like space sucked in on itself. Asahi appeared in a strange place where the floor was an ocean, and above them was a large moon. He stood on the rippling water, his reflection rippling along with it. It was quite foggy, and he saw a young Godfrey learning how to box. "This is not honorable, but the stance never gives the opponent a chance," Asahi muttered as he approached Godfrey. Within Asahi was Ken, who sighed with his eyes shut. "The dying star does indeed outshine the sun in its dying breath. You've ultimately lost, Godfrey the sun." Asahi flashed forward as the young Godfrey grew and looked 16. It was time. The samurai lifted up his katana. His slash in this realm was straight to the soul. It couldn't be blocked, it couldn't be evaded. This was the moon's stance. This was his final dance, and it might seem that he died surpassing the one he saw as the greatest prodigy. Right then, Godfrey's figure glitched and became his 19-year-old self. It glitched again in less than the speed of thought, and Godfrey now had one eye and one arm. Asahi swung down his katana. A massive wave went down, but the sound of metal hitting metal echoed, causing the samurai and his summoner's eyes to widen. Standing where Godfrey once stood was a shadow-armored being with his back facing the samurai, yet he blocked the blow with a golden sword. The golden blade of the sword was etched with lots of words that looked like runes. This being, whose soul itself was armored, an occurrence that was supposed to be impossible, tilted his head toward Asahi. One bright golden eye pierced through the great distance between them. It turned, revealing 2 golden irises embedded in an armored body made of shadow and mist. Ken's eyes slowly widened. This shadowy being was clearly heavily armored. Yet, it lurched forward, traversing the distance between them in one leap. Asahi swung for the kill. Taking out a target midair was much easier than on land, but this shadow came with such force that the impact of their blades clashing pulled Asahi's arms off his shoulders. The katana fell into the water as both arms hung limp. In the next moment, the golden sword went right through his chest. Blood rolled down the golden blade, and the samurai's knees hit the water, forcing violent ripples. Within his summon, Ken's eyes remained wide. A lot of questions went through his mind at that moment, but then he chuckled. "I guess we all have our secrets." Asahi's body suddenly plummeted into the water under the gaze of the shadowy being. Godfrey dropped to one knee and one arm to support his fall, his long sword ready to retaliate, but he saw Asahi dissipate, leaving Ken behind. There was a wound on his chest, and it was bleeding out. Not even his plague could heal this wound. Ken chuckled weakly as he stared at the sky. The sun had appeared at the horizon in the east, its first radiance gracing the skies beyond the clouds. "I lost." Godfrey plunged his sword into the ground and slowly sat down. The island was falling apart, several portions collapsing into the sea all around them. Great rumbling sounds filled the air as they fell. He removed his helmet. "What did you do?" "Went to your soul. You were so close to dying, but then I saw your trump card." "Heh." He laughed weakly as blood slipped from the sides of his lips. "Godfrey the sun, Ken the dying star," he whispered, staring at him. Godfrey looked away. "Why do you keep calling me the sun?" "That's how I see you, like a sun whose radiance reaches far beyond his presence." "I feel free, Godfrey," Ken said. "I don't know why, but I feel that." There were no more words. Godfrey turned and saw Ken staring straight at him, but his eyes had dimmed. "At peace," Godfrey whispered, and for some reason his right eye grew moist. His heart boiled with anger. What use was all this power, he asked himself once more, if pain still exists? Maybe the younger him was wrong all along to assume power took away pain. Power had its place. Maybe it was limited. Godfrey grabbed his helmet and donned it. His one eye gleamed. He refused to believe that. Beings of greater power existed. The mana tree existed. He didn't care if it was something no one would reach. Setting his goals on the impossible would allow him to at least climb to the peak. Peace had to be somewhere up there. He might be coping, but what else was there? Fate wasn't his problem, he was. His hand trembled as he picked up Ken's core, then rose to his feet, grabbed his sword and ascended what was left of the island. As the rays of the sun grew stronger, a shadow stretched onto the top of a hill. A being that looked almost human sat under a peach tree. He wore a white robe, but centipedes crawled out from the robe that was spread out. His eyes were hollowed out. Small centipedes crawled in and out. He wrapped a white cloth around his scalp and held a bamboo flute. The sun's rays met the canopy of the tree, casting a shadow over this creature. It kept playing the flute as the long shadow of another being stretched across the hilltop. Slowly, a man clad in golden armor ascended. With each step he took, his presence grew stronger and stronger. Finally, the source of the plague, the white Ronin demon, tilted his head as Godfrey's head appeared. One golden eye locked on him. Godfrey stopped on the last step, staring straight at the white Ronin demon. "I heard you were the greatest swordmaster. You have returned to the physical world to ensure your reign never ends. Pick up your weapon and defend yourself now." The white demon lowered his head, then began to play his flute. A centipede with a blue carapace and a red head crawled out from under his robe. It lunged at him with great speed, almost like a blur, but Godfrey grabbed it. The centipede made irritating sounds as it wrapped around Godfrey, squeezing itself with strength beyond that of the giant Solstice fought. On the other hand, Godfrey applied pressure to his grip. He didn't use his sword. No, using a sword would be mercy for this thing. It was tough, tougher than the others, and must have had an extremely good resistance to fire. But Godfrey planned to show it another fire. The fire of a man, no, a king's rage. His gauntleted fingers clamped around the centipede's head and neck. Then, with a soft grunt, he slowly ripped the head of the demigod spirit demon from its body. Green blood gushed down. Tossing it to the ground, he stomped on its head, then eyed the Ronin who stared at him. It had no eyes but that expression, those clenched teeth and that squeezed old face. That was the pride of a being that refused defeat, even when it stared him in the face. "I'm waiting for you, stand." Godfrey scowled, grabbed the Ronin and lifted him up. The Ronin's legs were gone and he had withered up from the inside out. This was just flesh sticking to bones. "You're not a man, you're a monster that even frightens a demon. I like that." "It's good that you do." Godfrey tossed him aside, picked up the flute and removed his helmet. When the Ronin saw that, his eyes widened. "Wait, wait, wait, I can." Godfrey played the flute, staring straight at him. He figured out a bit of how this thing should work. It's his mind. Centipedes tore out of the Ronin's body. At his will, they ate the others, growing to great size. Centipedes kept ripping out of the Ronin until nothing was left of him. His fingers tightened around the bamboo flute, but weakened at the last moment. Then he went ahead and crushed it. A core manifested above the Ronin's corpse. Godfrey grabbed it, burned all the centipedes to a crisp, then sat below the tree. His eyes opened in the soul space, and he stood before a huge door. Only a little bit of it was petrified. Zahn walked through the corridor right toward him. "We're done with them. Your generals are ready," the chief alchemist said. "Generals?" "Abaddon and Apollyon. For 10 of us alchemists, the system rewards you with 2. A fair reward for the effort, Zahn said. Godfrey handed him a core. Zahn took it. Once you've unlocked these doors, you will face a trial as a champion of your world. One final enemy to free your world from this stage. Only then can Apollyon and Abaddon step out. I know this, Godfrey responded. It's tough and all 10 worlds face this final trial with aid. You will need a team, my king. The trial allows the champion to choose. That does sound convenient. I will face it alone. You will face at least a monarch. You don't have a skill that grants you the ability to kill a god, Zahn replied. I have my generals. You can see that I will lose even with them. That's why you have recommended I bring others. I will not risk the lives of my friends, and I will return from that trial as the unknown king. Godfrey tilted his head. Come to think of it. Why should I abide by the Mana Tree's rules when it has tampered with lives it should have left alone? Welcome me when I come. Zahn slowly lowered his head. Right then, the last stone flakes fell off, revealing the golden door in all its ancient splendor. He pressed his hand against the door to push it open, but it didn't open. Instead, an image flashed in his mind. Amazon City flashed in his eyes. It felt like he was seeing through the eyes of his younger self, staring at his father's statue. That was the spot. A special dungeon was awaiting him there. There could be many of them across the globe for different titled gods. If they were going to face at least a monarch, Godfrey could already foresee a great portion of the demigods dying. That was his destination after recovering mana, but there was something he had to do first. In a large conference room, lots of photographers constantly took pictures of Mrs. Fukushima, who stood behind a lectern. She cleared her throat. The Council of the Heads has seen Japan's dire state and is heavily invested in making sure all titled gods are called upon and sent to clear this dungeon. This is not the end of Japan. People believe in this country and will die for it. I am one of them. Captain Ken was another. He was just 20 but had the greatest talent we had ever seen. He marched into that dungeon. Unfortunately, I sent him there alone with Godfrey Daniels. She sighed. I take full responsibility for such a short-sighted decision. Ken's orders were to return if it got too dire. Today, we not only mourn a soldier but also the lives that have been lost in this plague. Know this, everyone that hears my voice. Japan will not fall. The authorities will not fail your trust. Oh, I have my reservations. A deep voice rang as a man suddenly materialized. It seemed like he had been standing there but was invisible to the human eye. Clad in golden armor still reeking with days of no bath and blood, Godfrey walked through the crowd of photographers and journalists. The audience froze in their seats as they looked at the man everyone thought was dead. Mrs. Fukushima didn't even utter his name. It felt like he was tossed into the trash the moment he was declared dead. Godfrey stood on the podium, while security agents swarmed around Mrs. Fukushima. He chuckled. You see this? He jabbed his finger at her. I have no need to sweeten your hearts. Our hearts all around this world are already dark enough, and all we've done is worsen them. And this woman here is one of the reasons. She is the cause of all these deaths. She also gave Ken an order to kill me, a man who came to kill the cause of the plague. I despise you. He tilted his head toward Mrs. Fukushima, whose breath became unstable. She could see the mad glint in that one eye. An unstable demigod was no different from a mad, unreasonable man with a nuclear bomb. To hell with this ill government, to hell with all this fallacy. Damn it all. For what you've done, I sentence you to death. A golden portal appeared. The agents also lit up their own portals, but Godfrey slammed all of them to the ground with telekinesis. Mountain appeared as their heads cracked against the ground, and he slammed his hammer axe into Mrs. Fukushima's head. Her eyes couldn't even widen properly, as her head was blown off. Cold shock swept through the spectators. Even the photographers felt their hands weaken. This was madness. Police cars screeched to a stop outside the building. There were dozens of police cars and even more armored vehicles. Helicopters flew around the structure, along with aerial summons crying out aggressively. A superintendent with short red hair and a lean, muscular build, clad in black uniform with double rows of silver buttons, stepped out of a car. Summoning circles flashed all around the structure, and 14-foot-tall, red-skinned monstrosities with two horizontal horns spreading out from their bone-covered skulls stepped out. They looked like beasts on their hind legs. Their fangs were exposed as these stone heads had no lips. The arms of these stone heads were massive, and their fingers were just extended claws. Thick tails swept behind them. Superintendent Redhead lifted up one hand, and over 100 stone head summoners, each of them at the Paragon tier, fused into their summons. Redhead walked boldly into the building, followed by a few agents holding shields with prints that looked like those of a tortoise. According to the intel, the dictator remained in the conference room. To Redhead, maybe he was prepared to surrender because this time he would face the true might of a nation. There were summons in the air and on land. More were on their way. With a hard look, he pushed open the door, revealing an empty conference room. Not even one soul could be found on the seats, except the golden-armored, blood-stained individual seated on the edge of the podium. As Redhead walked into the hall, Godfrey lifted his head. Redhead stopped. "Have you come to get me arrested?" "It's going to be worse than getting arrested," Redhead declared. His response was met with silence, so he took a few steps forward. Mrs. Fukushima's headless body lay on the podium, her blood soaking half of it. There was almost nothing left of her head. Redhead saw this, then returned his gaze to Godfrey. "I am Superintendent Redhead, a titled god just like you, but you see, my summon has the innate skill to sire other summons of his kind. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? There are over 100 paragons who can send this place right to the Earth's core. We can make sure you do not see the light of day if you make this tough for us." "Superintendent," Godfrey muttered as agents spread out in the hall, moving between rows of seats. Of course, they knew their bullets would not be able to harm a demigod, and even if they had demigod-killing bullets, there would be too few. This led to Godfrey believing whatever they were going to shoot would be something else. There were so many summons out there with diverse innate skills that the government would have exploited this to make sure powerful summoners were kept in line. Especially after Cain. "You have a bad record, Godfrey Daniels. You are just one cruel young man with power you shouldn't have. It seems like you're prepared to continue the carnage you started when you were 16. Redhead frowned. Godfrey's silence wasn't comforting. He expected rage, yelling, but this silence made the hair on his body rise. "Do you remember what I did in Brooklyn?" Godfrey's question made Redhead's eyes widen. The breaths of his agents shook as they all looked at their superintendent. "You're bluffing. That skill will kill way more than what the plague did. You won't kill innocent people." Godfrey lifted up his head, staring right at Redhead. "So you know that. Then why are you here?" His sudden outburst almost made a few agents press the trigger. "What you've done cannot save this world. Without the law, without the authorities, there will be a lawless world. You'll only bring a world where anyone with power can act however they want." Godfrey slowly tilted his head. "Isn't that how it's always been? You all hide under the guise of the law but still control the narrative. This shrewdness irks me more than the evil that has infested this world." His head went to Mrs. Fukushima's corpse. She would have gone free. Over 1 million people have died because of her, yet she still stood here controlling people's minds. I know she sees the public as sheep, stupid, selfish sheep. I'm no better, but this is a statement. Enough of this rubbish. "Godfrey Daniels, go on your knees and put your hands in the air," Redhead ordered as he wore a mask, and all the other agents also wore masks. "You don't want us to do this. If you run, we will find you. Your way isn't better. Godfrey rose to his feet. This is what happens when you push people too far. I tried doing it another way, but I've had enough. Patience has always been my weakness. You'll just stab me in the back at the slightest opportunity. I'll be branded a devil anyway. Why not now rather than later? You leave us no choice. Redhead held his pistol tighter. I leave you a choice. You can load this room full of poison gas. Maybe it can kill a demigod, but I will kill every last one of you and those outside. Or, Godfrey knew he didn't have enough mana for this second part, but he said it nonetheless. I will use Sun Annihilation to reset the city. You choose. Redhead's eyes widened. He wasn't dealing with a sane person anymore. This was the worst kind of threat to deal with. A summoner at the highest tier with this kind of mindset, and worse, it was none other than Godfrey, the Golden Devil, this time. Godfrey patted his shoulder and walked out of the room. There were other ways to kill Mrs. Fukushima, such as assassination, but she didn't deserve that. She deserved to die on screen, like she should have if the government was fair. Besides, he had been scared enough. He had a whole world to himself. When the agents outside saw Godfrey, over 100 guns were aimed at him, and the stone-head summons roared, preparing to lunge. Godfrey lifted his left hand, folded his fingers until one finger was left, and pressed it against his helmet where his lips should have been. He turned toward Redhead, who stood at the exit. Make sure the next Mrs. Fukushima knows me. The authorities are bigger than you. Much bigger, Redhead retorted. Godfrey nodded, then vanished. I actually forgot he could teleport. Godfrey entered a motel. The motel's reception lobby was small but tidy, with a worn wooden counter facing the entrance. A faded couch sat against one wall beside a low coffee table stacked with old magazines, while a few potted plants tried to brighten the space. Warm yellow lights cast a cozy glow over the tiled floor. Behind the counter, rows of numbered key hooks and a small clock completed the modest, welcoming room. The receptionist squinted when she saw a pale-faced, golden-haired man with heavy bags under his eyes. One of his eyes was just a black, empty hole, a daunting sight it was. His left arm looked like it was covered by an ornate armor, but when she noticed his entire body lacked armor, it dawned on her that this young man might also lack a left arm. He looked like the typical young man who awakened late or had a weak summon, yet decided to embark on the profession of a freelancer, but ended up biting off more than he could chew. If she could guess, he was one of those solitary freelancers. Those ones wanted the spoils all to themselves. I want a room, Godfrey whispered. The receptionist nodded, then turned to the wall of keys. Don't you think you need an eye patch for that eye? She dropped a key on the counter. From what I can see, the wounds you bear inside are worse than your eye and arm. It's a tough world out there. She sighed as Godfrey took the key silently and moved for the hallway. We have food. Godfrey shook his head, a sign that he had no need for food despite looking like a man desperately hanging on to life. He was in one of the small cities built in dungeons. In this city especially, people barely used televisions. Only top freelancing associations had those in their towers. And this motel was on the outskirts. It would be one of the first to fall if there was a swarm of monsters, but in exchange for such a dangerous position, they gained lots of customers. With a creak, the door opened, revealing a small room with a little bed and a door that led to the bathroom and toilet. There would be no need for money until it was time to leave. Such business made it easy for people to flock in, but it was another matter entirely if they planned to leave without paying. Godfrey's knowledge wasn't too deep, but most dungeon cities like these had black markets and people ready to experiment with their summoned strange, innate skills on captives. The law wasn't as firm here, well, for now. He sat on the bed, and silence engulfed the room for a while before he shut his eyes and opened the eyes of his soul in the soul space. Days floating in that darkness did the unthinkable to him. Aside from being plagued by hunger, thirst, and guilt, he spent days in absolute silence, where the voice of his mind was loud, where the cycle of what he thought had grown past resurfaced. God, he even hallucinated. Sometimes he drifted into sleep and woke up, thinking he was speaking to someone. Listening to Mrs. Fukushima speak was the last straw. It snapped him, and now it seemed like he was back to where it began. Godfrey stood before his throne, staring at it. Words of comfort. He desperately yearned for them, but feared they would eat away at his pain, his guilt, his anger. Sitting on the staircase that led to the throne, he leaned forward and buried his head in his thighs. What do I do now? A soft voice, his own voice, whispered in the boundless depths of his mind. It forced him to shut his eyes as if that could silence his mind. Alas, the mind was a hard thing to silence. It could be drowned out under violent emotions, but it would still speak. Godfrey could tell. He wanted to pity himself. He wanted to hold onto this pain and guilt because he believed letting it go made him shallow. It flickered in his mind. The moment his knights fought their last battle against the centipedes in the belly of the Black Sea, he gave them up for himself. They weren't just summons, but people he was growing to see as friends. Slowly, he was making attempts to redeem himself from seeing them as just fighting machines, but all that progress drowned in the Black Sea. Could it be that he valued the lives of his summons more than his own? What kind of a summoner was he then? Maybe when he loved, he did so stupidly, and when he hated, it was extreme. Balance. Godfrey was learning balance, but it was harder than it looked. Godfrey, a soft, sweet voice flowed into his ears. Godfrey's right eye widened, then he tilted his head to his throne. A head was peeking from behind it. Isolde. She had been sitting behind the throne, hugging her legs. After she was retrieved, worry clouded her thoughts, forcing her to come to the throne room. Frey. Isolde's eyes moistened when she saw him. He was far from the radiant man she knew. His charm and smile far gone. All that was left was a pale, dark-eyed young man. His skin had an unhealthy color. The flesh around his eyes had sunken, but only one eye socket had an eyeball. The other was hollow, a sight she never thought she would see. His iron arm made her lips quiver. Iso, his voice was extremely low. His one eye was wide for a moment, then it narrowed, and he turned away, smiling bitterly. I'm sorry. Isolde held back her impending tears. He already looked broken. Her tears would do nothing but worsen the situation. So she approached and sat beside him. You cleared the dungeon. I did. It did this to you. Yes. There was silence, a heavy silence that overwhelmed them both at this moment. Isolde held her man's face, gently caressed it, then asked, "An eye, a limb can't break you. What happened, Frey? I thought I was strong, Iso, but I've finally realized that I'm weak. Maybe physically I can crush a mountain, but then questions plague my heart. A place where I can't hide behind a shield or a wall of knights," he replied. I spent days on the Black Sea, alone, struggling with mana infested with centipedes, but all I could think about was my generals. I threw them into the sea to get out. Now I think about it, I could have teleported, but I panicked. I couldn't think straight. The waves were immense even below. I could barely see a thing, not even the boat. It was all dark. Teleporting was a bargain, but I just kept thinking I could have teleported. He tilted his head toward her. Mountain began to speak clearly because I grew and the castle restored him, but each time they die, they will revert and revert until they're just hunks of flesh and metal doing whatever I command. What's the countdown? How many times do they need to die for it to happen? I don't know, but one death means one quota down. And then I thought, why didn't I bring you? Why didn't I sacrifice you? Doesn't that mean that I value you more than them? Doesn't that mean deep within me, I saw them as expendable if it comes to it? His eyes narrowed. Do you know what that means? It means all those efforts I thought I put in to make them better, happier might be hypocritical. He looked away. People will never forget the Golden Devil ISO. I fought against that. I refused to be what they wanted, and for a while I thought I was right, but when I floated in that darkness, I thought about it. Was I truly saving my mother back then, or was it just an orchestrated scheme, and I was made to kill all those policemen? Are their deaths truly justified? Isolde didn't know what to say. Was it Kane's plot or was it my mother's? I thought I was a good person. I want to be a good person because I can't stand doing wrong, but all of a sudden it seems I was the devil in golden armor all along, and I can't get it out of my head anymore. The woman I wanted to save is the reason for all this. Right in her is the one I love, and yet the true her is the mana tree. I thought I could work with it, but it's hard. It fills me with frustration, with rage. Then I killed Mrs. Fukushima. It's meant to be a justifiable death, but I find a part of me asking how many more. There's doubt, and it's ripping me apart. Isolde laid his head on her thighs and ran her fingers through his golden, messy hair like she had always dreamed of. If you were a bad person, you would not be thinking of all this. You have a good conscience, a beautiful one beneath all this muscle. It's your compass. A good heart is a weakness, ISO. The stronger I get, the more I realize this. No one is good. I killed those policemen, 300 men and many more, believing I was right. I have killed, and all of a sudden it seems to have caught up with me. I find myself asking why. Isolde pointed at his chest. It's your compass. You're too good to be with us, Godfrey, too sweet and cute. When Isolde saw his right eye narrow, she laughed softly. You know, when I heard about your mother being the mana tree and that I am one of Earth's chosen ones, do you know what I realized? Godfrey looked at her. Isolde smiled. That Isolde didn't exist. From before I could begin forming my own way, you were already in my head. My parents had also begun grooming me and making sure they told me I would lead the Pendragon house one day. On one side, the mana tree had made sure I would meet up with you and like you. On the other, my parents made sure I would end up as the Pendragon head. That's all I am, the ambition and goal of others. Godfrey couldn't believe his ears. It's all I've ever chased after. You and the position of the head, nothing else. Why did I stay even after realizing that my entire life had been manipulated? I looked around and discovered that I loved your heart, and if I was manipulated too, then I don't want that manipulation to stop. I'm stuck here. I can't break it off, yet I don't want to. I see myself as a prisoner who loves her cell. But I know and I'm sure that you're a good person. That's what I came to protect, and I will dip my hand into the darkest pits to keep it. Forgive my failures. She leaned down and pecked his lips. Godfrey, on the other hand, was dumbfounded by what Isolde just told him. What do we do now that you've killed one of the highest-ranking officials? They'll come after you. My dad can't stop it. Isu. Isolde glared at him. Don't feel pity for me, Godfrey, she laughed. You're not even out of your mess and you're feeling pity for another. All the signs of your good heart are right there. What we need to handle now is what we are going to do from now on. She flipped away her hair, which fell on Godfrey's face when she pecked him. All I need to do is clear the trial, free Earth from the ruination, and we won't be bound to it anymore. But the trial, you know what it's going to do to you. It has to happen. Isolde bit her lower lip. Then, if it does, I want you to chase after Kane while I try to bring you back. Kill him, at least one of him. You owe your wife that. Godfrey's right eye gleamed. I will make sure I will not forget. He left her lap, covered himself with imperial, and carved two huge words on the floor of the throne room. Kill Kane next. To kill. This was growing to be a burden due to the tapestry of lies and manipulation he had seen. But Kane had to go. Godfrey stared at the floor while Isolde watched him. She cocked her head. You need to eat. We also have to meet your mother so we can restore your eye and limb. I know what you're going through, but if you grow past this tear, I don't think she'll be able to heal you anymore. He moved back to the dais, sitting beside her. Although he was silent, Isolde took it as a sign that he wasn't going to refuse. We're at the end of the ruination. I wonder what tier we're going to ascend to. Monarch tier will transform our blood to ichor. The skill of the sovereign tier will give us the ability to compel people with our words. These are skills of a god indeed. But what about the God King and God Queen tiers? She didn't say, Godfrey said. Suddenly the plates at his forearm spread throughout his body, then came out. Imperial had only one arm. I can help with that. I was once the armor of a sovereign tier god. Tusk, I can't believe you're already close. Isolde eyed Godfrey with curiosity. He said he can help us with the God King/God Queen skill, he explained. So you got it all wrong. When your blood becomes ichor, you can still be damaged and captured, but it will be hard for those below the monarch tier to kill you. Almost impossible, but there'll always be a few who become godkillers. Imperial waved his one hand. It gets better at the sovereign tier, though. You have the skill called will compulsion. You can only say one word in your mind or with your mouth, and whatever you speak to will obey. It doesn't matter if it's a living being or a wall. Godfrey blinked twice, amazed by the skill. Then he turned to Isolde and told her what he heard. The edge of her lips tilted up. That skill was a whole upgrade from Will Freeze. What about the next? Godfrey asked. At the God King/God Queen tier, you gain the skill called Rule of Law. It's not a joke at this point, and we're not dealing with a skill that can affect just one man, Imperial said. My owner died before he got to that tier, but from what we heard, a law is etched into your heart. Some laws are either similar or the same, but some are completely unique to the individual. Most times it's unique. You can't determine which law you will gain at that tier, but Rule of Law allows you to enforce a law over a region. The amount of mana you have to expend will reflect the size of the law it covers. It also takes a ridiculous amount of mana, a great chunk, I'll be honest. It's so ridiculous. At that tier, your body burns a great amount of mana, especially when engaged in battles. Skills are naturally much more powerful, but most God Kings/God Queens can't handle the mana loss. Godfrey frowned when he heard that. That's a crippling flaw for a tier that's supposed to be amongst the top 3 in all ascended worlds. He turned to Isolde to inform her. But Imperial's sudden burst made him shake his head. Was this armor joking the whole time? There's a balance. At that tier, there is another skill called Mana Tribute. As kings and queens, you can find loyalists who shall continually meditate to keep your body flowing with mana. That makes sense. God Kings would have been useless without a skill like that. There's no way meditation will keep up with their consumption. They were bound to be crippled. He told Isolde, who was surprised at first but frowned a moment later. That sounds quite complicated. Doesn't that mean Cain will have the advantage? He has been gathering followers for nearly a century now. He should have millions of people. She's right, Imperial said. You see, keeping people's loyalty is essential as a God King. That tier wasn't just given the titles of King and Queen for nothing. You would have to rule a group of people to ensure you build a set for Mana Tribute. Now there are 2 classes on this tier: fathers, mothers, and rogues. You see, as fathers and mothers, you have to build and protect your people, or other God Kings/God Queens will crush them, weakening you. Then they'll hunt you down and consume your mana core. Imperial eyed both of them. Then there are the rogues. These ones don't use Mana Tribute. For Mana Tribute to work, you have to put your imprint in a particular place where those meditating gather. Rogues, however, do not follow this tradition. They opt for dungeon hunting, risking being manaless for years. I heard rumors that they hide their mana tributes, but God Kings can track those down, so it's impossible. I almost forgot, there's another group called the Keepers. They're God Kings and Queens that act as protectors to certain places, mostly mana tributes to the superior God King they serve. Imperial said. There are a lot of things to go through. Ascending to that tier alone creates an economy. It makes you a threat to be disposed of. Rogues, on the other hand, just go about raiding dungeons. A great number of them die. But few succeed. They evolve to become primordials. The logic of that tier is entirely different. Rest assured you won't have any problem with mana anymore. Oh, that's a relief then, Godfrey replied, then asked, what's their skill? I just told you. Your body is made of mana. You have an infinite amount of it, however, your face can't be seen. What? Godfrey looked at Isolde and explained to her. Her reaction was the same. Confusion. Why? Imperial shook his helmet of a head. I was at the sovereign tier. Primordials are barely seen in the world I was born in. However, when I changed masters and got to other worlds, I was able to see a few. Primordials always have their heads hidden by a hood or helmet that fully hides everything, including their eyes. Some wear hoods above their helmets for assurance. Godfrey frowned. Does something happen to their face? Imperial shrugged. I don't know, there's something else though. They have this halo of pure heated energy bleeding faint curtains of light from their heads and shoulders. That halo is a manifestation of the exorbitant mana within them. It's so great it forms a manifestation over their heads. And I don't know if this is true, but whoever sees the face of a primordial loses his sight or dies instantly. And the primordial drops back to a god king/god queen. If that is true, I understand why they protect their faces. It would be madness to drop after all that risk and sacrifice. What about true ancients? I've never seen one. The tier exists, so someone must have gotten there. But you see, the next set of tiers are called ancient gods because since the last ascended world, it's been countless years and no other has ascended. So imagine what it means for these ascended worlds to name the peak true ancients. They have to be so rare, it would be a phenomenal thing for one to be cited. In the end, your world's current system cannot hold its power. It's bound to be broken. After he told Isolde, she didn't seem as concerned as he was. Rogue or father, a keeper is out of the picture, and we don't even know much of that class's advantage. You tend to avoid leading even when almost everything pushes you in that direction, Imperial said. He's right, Isolde added. How do you know what he said? Godfrey looked at her. Isolde scoffed. I don't have to hear what he said to know it, especially after you spoke. Our plan still hasn't changed. We can seek people, humanoids, beasts, and even plant beast masters that are unhappy with the system. We have the influence. Let's set aside the fact that I'm more infamous than famous. Where would I take those people? To paradise. It has grown used to its population, the economy, and everything else. It can't handle more. That's why they focus on hunting more than gathering more people, with the exception of those that are exceptional. That opens a question of where do I take these people? To Patan. It doesn't have the technology we have here. That alone will make people want to return. Godfrey said, then whispered, I also don't want to tarnish the Patan culture by introducing too much. Elves can manage the wilds without causing too much change, but if I want to make it comfortable for us, I'll have to introduce our technology. Patan already has its identity. I won't ruin it. Paradise has its own civilization. It's the identity that keeps people there. Even if you don't want to bring Earth's technology, there are thousands that will be willing to leave, to step into a world free of oppression and hate. You've always wanted to help. Even if you keep fighting the bullies, you can't get them all. Isolde responded. With this, however, you can. I barely kept the house of order and now we're fugitives again. You're better at that, you're handling dragons. You should be a mother, I'll be a rogue. His right eye narrowed. It's been my one goal. As we ascend and gain godly powers, we also become more of myth than man, more unknown than known. His eyes narrowed further, then widened. That's why the primordials can't be seen. The mana tree is seeking what isn't known, so the closer you get, the more myth you become, the more you're inclined to be unknown. Maybe that's why the true ancients are unknown. Isolde squinted. If they're already unknown, what is the mana tree searching for then? She's gotten what she wanted. Godfrey was silent. Then it dawned on him. It's a loop. The mana tree has gotten the answer several times, but once the unknown becomes known, it wants to know if there's something higher. It's an endless loop. It's not willing to stop, it's obsessed, and that obsession has been growing after each answer. It's mad at this point. It's asking a question, like we all do. Why me? Why this? Why that? Look at your world, you still haven't stopped searching for better technology, you're always creating. There is no peak, no rest. The next thing is better than the last, and there's this hunger for something even better. In this case, what's asking the question is an entity like the mana tree, an entity crucial to existence itself. Imperial said. So, what is the end? Isolde's question made Godfrey tremble. He was afraid. He didn't know any more. There had to be a mistake somewhere. Clearly, the mana tree wasn't supposed to have such intelligence. As frightening as the future seemed right now, Godfrey had pinned down his next few objectives. Become a god king, hope he gets a good rule of law, then go for Cain. If he could kill Cain, he would be able to break out of the tight corner the mana tree had placed him. His problem lay in the mana tribute. Did it really? He had knights. There was no need for people. His knights would be inefficient if he didn't have access to the real world of Patan. On the other hand, Arthur sat in the back seat of a vehicle, heading for his mansion while on a video call with the rest of the heads. Killing a head on a live broadcast, that Godfrey Daniels must be caught. We are not playing the stupid games the previous Mr. Manhattan was playing. I want him caught dead or alive, on Earth or any other world. If this isn't addressed and fast, we lose credibility and respect. More than that, the government falters. Mr. Moscow ranted aggressively. Mr. Cairo nodded as Mr. Moscow spoke. But Mrs. Fukushima caused the death of 1 million people. Japan is grieving immensely. Do you know what it means for 1 million people to die in a span of just 11 days? Arthur spoke up. We need to wait until a new head is picked to represent Japan, and then we can. There is no need for that, Mr. London said. Just then he added one more person, and the name that popped up was Mr. Berlin. Arthur frowned. What is this? Exactly what your eyes see. Mr. Moscow's response made Arthur's frown deepen. You can't make such a heavy change without the council meeting and voting. His voice rose for the first time. Oh, we shall be voting. All in favor of Ana Bain taking the office of Mrs. Manhattan, lift your hand, Mr. London said, and they all lifted their hands one after the other, except for Mrs. Athens and Arthur. 5 of us lifted up our hands. Your office as head is hereby revoked, Mr. Arthur Pendragon. If you choose to submit Godfrey to us, then we shall reconsider. Mr. London disconnected. The others followed, and Mrs. Athens was the last. Arthur stared at his tablet with simmering anger, then he slowly lowered his head. Of course, they would not revoke the oath to make sure he didn't reveal some sensitive secrets. They want Godfrey at all costs, and they have what it takes if they're willing to go all out. An all-out war against Godfrey will result in countless deaths and bloodshed. Godfrey won't be willing to kill innocent people unless he's pushed too far, and the council isn't willing to sacrifice that much right now, so they want to coerce him to submit. Eventually, this fragile peace will rupture. Arthur massaged his head. Godfrey shouldn't have killed Mrs. Fukushima. Unfortunately, as it would seem, this world had turned into a place where the great wicked ones could not be judged or killed. Godfrey, who stepped out to ensure justice, was on the track of becoming an enemy, a full-blown one. The car drove into the mansion. Arthur's eyes moved through the greenery. The fields, the flowers on both sides of the lane, the trees planted at certain spots to provide shelter. It was a wide place that offered serenity just by looking at it. He descended from the car and entered the mansion. But the moment he swung the door to the sitting room, what greeted his eyes was his wife lying in the ruins of the furniture. The wall was ripped and broken in some parts. The 2 demigods that were meant to keep his wife company had their necks twisted to the back of their bodies. They weren't even able to unleash their summons. His wife, on the other hand, lay on the ground. Her knees down to her feet were cut off. Her elbows down to her fingers were also cut off. Her blood had soaked the rug and spread out. No, 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 no. Arthur clenched his teeth, scrambling towards his wife. His knees crashed into the floor as he held her. Arthur couldn't even hear a heartbeat, so he lowered his head to her chest. Please, please, his voice trembled. Thump, a heartbeat, extremely soft. Right then, a weak voice rang. He said, "This is Mercy, don't ever threaten me again." Arthur clenched his teeth, his entire body trembling intensely, both in rage and pain. To turn his wife into a messenger even after all he had done. Kane! A soft rumble forced its way through his clenched teeth. A crew of 4 fishermen rode on the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. They were a few miles away from Charlestown, Rhode Island. One of the men looked at the dark skies and clicked his tongue. "It's been months. I've grown sick of not seeing the sun." "You can take a vacation to a Blue Gate dungeon. It's normal in those places," a younger man in his mid-20s replied as his hair swooped about in the wind. "I hate those dungeons. There's no way I'm taking a vacation in a place where beasts could just storm in at any moment." "Why are you fishing then?" "I was born for the sea, boy." The others chuckled while the young man scoffed. Because of the Mana eclipse, Earth was in perpetual darkness, so they had to use lights while moving through the sea, even though it was daytime. "A great catch," a balding man chuckled as he watched their catch squirming frantically in the net. Some had grown weak. "It can't be," the younger man suddenly said, forcing everyone to look in his direction. They saw him staring out into the darkness at a faint figure by a rock. A rock, they'd gone through the route several times and had never seen it, and that slender figure resting on it. Could that be a mermaid? The balding man's pitch rose by several levels. He held the railing, squinting along with the other men, except the unfortunate driver, who desperately wanted to see as all the other guys went wild when they confirmed that slender figure might actually be a mermaid. The driver finally couldn't resist the urge and glanced in their direction. There, on a smooth rock protruding from the ocean surface, lay a feminine figure. Her long, silky black hair was more delicate than anything he had ever seen. Maybe the darkness affected his vision. But the light allowed him to make out her figure. Her waist was in the water, and she wore a bra made from clamshells. Those clamshells were quite big enough to hold her bust. The balding man whistled while the younger man rushed at the driver. "What are you doing? Turn around. We've got to check this out." "You heard him," the balding man said. "What in the world is that?" The first man looked apprehensive. The creature was lying facing the sky. Her hair spread out, covering a major portion of the rock and floating on the water. The driver turned the fishing boat but stopped a safe distance away. However, their bright light shone right on the resting creature. It spun, holding the rock and staring at them with a frightened face. When the 4 men saw the creature's face, there was a moment of silence. The bald man tapped the apprehensive man. "You're seeing this," he whistled. "We're making headlines. The first natural humanoid beast in our own world." He leaned on the railing. "What a delicate thing." The creature, with the delicate features of a woman whose looks could entrap a man, cocked her head in confusion and curiosity. The first man, who was once apprehensive, recoiled in disgust when he noticed his thoughts of her looks. "What fish turned into this?" The balding man looked at him in disappointment. The younger one slapped the first man's shoulder. "I say we capture it, it's not even running. What a naive creature." "Go closer," the balding man gestured to the driver. "Wait, what sea creature did this thing grow from?" the first man asked, taking a few steps back. A strange fear mixed with disgust rose in his chest. His heart began to beat a little faster. To him, this thing was an abomination. Yes, people might see him as strange and dislike him heavily, but he wasn't getting close to any strangely shaped creature. "Fish and man." "A big no, thanks." Seeing this, the balding man sighed heavily. "Send your dolphin down there. If—" He paused, then frowned. "Wait. If this thing indeed grew here, doesn't that mean it evolved from something? It wouldn't exactly look like the mermaids in pictures and movies or the ones those humanoid summoners have. Those ones were pretty, so was this one. Or was it a beast from a dungeon that had opened underwater? If that was true, then it would have long since attacked them." The youngest man summoned a huge dolphin with thick, carapace-like armor that dropped headfirst into the water. Upon activating resonance, his eyes gleamed, and he could see through his dolphin's eyes. His vision changed, and he saw the underwater. What extended below the rock was the mermaid's tail, but it spread out into a much bigger bulbous part with 8 thick tentacles, each with hundreds of suckers. A chill crept up the young man's spine. His radiant expression froze, then it died out, and he snapped his head toward the driver and retrieved his dolphin at that same moment. "Get us out of here." His voice wasn't just urgent, it contained terror. In a heartbeat, the boat was quickly heading away from the strange creature, and its innocent and curious expression faded the further they went. Then it sank into the water. The young man grabbed his head. "We're dead, we're dead." His voice was soft as he whispered to himself in gasps. "What did you see?" The balding man grabbed the young man. "Whatever he saw isn't what you want to set your eyes on, especially when it puts him in that state. And I have a feeling that thing is following us." At that moment, the fishing boat stopped. It almost turned upside down due to the force of what suddenly held it in place. "Get us out of here!" The balding man yelled frantically, cold sweat decorating his bald head as his eyes danced about. "What tier is it? For God's sake, what is that thing?" He screamed at the young man, who had no need to answer as 2 tentacles latched onto the boat. When the balding man saw the tentacles, he almost fainted. The driver kept trying to move the boat, but it wasn't possible. "Move, move, you stupid boat." He cursed a boat he always held dear, even giving it the name Darling. The balding man struggled to regain his courage. "We can." He turned and saw the first man was already off the boat. He only saw the tentacles flinging him into the distance. The beautiful woman rose out of the water, this time with a scowl. "Enough!" A soft voice rang, and a bright blue light flashed underwater. In the next moment, the monster noticed an enormous, colossal snake-like creature swirling around them. Droplets of cold water fell from the sky, splattering on her face. Her eyes settled on a silhouette in the distance. As he approached, the waves rose and fell, welcoming him. He wore a simple black tracksuit, covered his head with a hood. His head tilted downward, and shoulder-length blue hair fell out. The gentle raindrops gained strength. They fell so hard that each strike on the skin caused a minor sting. The half-octopus left the fishing boat. There were noticeable depressions on the metal, and she had broken the blades. That left the boat floating there like crippled prey at the mercy of its predator. A loud scream rang as the first man was lurched out of the ocean. He collapsed on the fishing boat, shocked to stupor. A good amount of water gathered behind the boat. The balding man looked around in great disbelief as they were moved away by the ocean itself. This had to be a water control skill, he thought. But why did this one feel like it was more than just a water control skill? The half-octopus sensed Levi heading for her, so she quickly hardened her tentacles. All 8 of them were covered in what looked like blue ice. With a sudden burst, the tentacles pierced outward like spears, but to her shock, Levi kept growing bigger and bigger. Levi's head burst out of the ocean with her within the confines of his enormous maw. She could see herself falling with large portions of water into the throat of this creature. Her eyes narrowed, and with a scoff, her tentacles elongated. Still coated with hardening, they pierced the soft flesh within the Leviathan. Levi's colossal size gave him great advantages, but there was also a major disadvantage. Roaring, Levi shook his head violently. Then that portion of water that vanished came back from the depths of his throat. The force behind this water blast wasn't what the half-octopus expected. She blacked out for a moment. When her eyes opened, she was several hundred feet in the air, spiraling uncontrollably. Pain, intense pain flared up. It was then she realized her bones were broken by the force behind the Leviathan's water blast. She had never seen such a creature of that size before. As she fell, the half-octopus set her eyes once more on the creature whose head poked out of the water. God, it was huge. The balding man and the other men were also frightened by the Leviathan. Great volumes of water gave way as it snaked into the air. Trying out her last attempt at survival, the half-octopus eyed the man standing not too far away and lashed a tentacle at him. It stretched like rubber, and ice crept atop it. With his left hand, King grabbed the hardened tentacle that was about to pierce his chest, then lifted up his head. The fine scales at his neck were revealed. Levi, wiser this time, made sure his fangs, each longer than a spear, would surely rip through the half-octopus. But she latched onto the fishing boat with the other tentacles, forcing herself out of the giant's way. King pulled back with great force. It altered her journey midair. The half-octopus's tentacles let go of the fishing boat, which had been squeezed further. As the half-octopus flew toward King, the relic trident materialized in his right hand. Both were about to collide. The half-octopus swung her other hardened tentacles, but to her utmost dismay, King's trident cut through them. Then he spun and launched the spear from his hand. It seemed like the trident teleported because the next place she found it was in her chest. She crashed with a splash, her eyes wide in disbelief. King walked barefoot to her. He ensured the water didn't allow her to sink. When he squatted, the half-octopus's blood-stained lips quivered. Who are you? King said nothing. He took her core, looked at the Leviathan's hungry eyes, and reluctantly tossed it. Levi swiftly shrunk, ate the core, and swam through the air, coiling around King's body like a snake, but with thicker, carapace-like scales that would put the dolphins to shame. His glowing eyes went to the men aboard the boat. One of them gulped. They couldn't ascertain whether this was a summoner or a humanoid summon. King waved his hand dismissively. That action caused a wave to move the boat with great force. Soon, King became a dark silhouette with piercing blue eyes, and after that they couldn't see him anymore. The wave took them straight to Charlestown Breachway State Boat Ramp. It wasn't like it was 100 years ago. No sharks of great size patrolled the area. These sharks were summons. The ramp had been rebuilt several times after beasts from the ocean, and tsunamis had crushed it during the apocalypse. Was that a summoner? The driver asked, but the others couldn't bring themselves to answer. One after the other, they left the boat, leaving behind their catch. Who cared about those fish? They just wanted to plant their feet on solid ground and maybe start thinking of a different business. The world had become too dangerous for people like them. Within Charlestown, a young man with short blue hair walked into one of the houses on the street with a nylon bag filled with groceries. He dropped his umbrella, chuckling softly as he had heard people outside complaining because no one expected rainfall. In a world where powerful summoners like the titled god tier had risen, forecasting proved to be helpless. This was the 14th dungeon he had cleared with Lucy. None were open dungeons. Her new summons were a menace. The only problem was the attitude of the first one. A vision flashed through his eyes. He saw the sea from above and knew its location. The Bermuda Triangle. That was where his trial was. If he wanted to be the one to clear the ruination stage and usher sunlight to Earth once more, facing that trial was the only way. However, they discussed it, and Godfrey was to be the one. It would cost him becoming something else. Should he just clear this trial and save Godfrey the torment of knowing he might be losing himself? Deep in thought, Percival dropped the groceries in the kitchen and went to the sitting room. Lucy walked out of her room, wrapped in a towel, and branched into the sitting room. Percival's eyes widened. He swiftly looked away and switched on the television while her pearly laughter rang. Lucy had been a little flirty since they came to Charlestown. He knew her to be painfully shy. But of course, this development was welcomed. The television came on. Well, it's obvious Godfrey Daniels is now the most wanted man in the entire world. Who in their right mind will execute a member of the council on a live broadcast? Godfrey Daniels, of course. I guess he's reverted back to when he was 16. The Golden Devil, killer of 300 cops, is back. And this time, he went for one of the most powerful people in the world. Who's safe from this young man? Percival's facial expression froze. The two women having a chat about the world's hottest topic reflected in his eyes. What? Right at that same moment, Lucy and Percival were standing at the docks, hands locked. Lucy was looking everywhere except Percival's face. She would only take glimpses at him, then look away. Are we not supposed to be focused on clearing the dungeons? That doesn't mean we won't have an us moment sometimes, Percival smiled softly. Besides, the speedboat is right there. Lucy's cheeks were flushed, and she looked away, fanning her face with one hand while scolding herself inwardly. Finally, an official date. Percival was bolder than she thought. Chapter 495, Foxtown. Others summon dragons. I summon legendary knights. Lucy, her heart burning with excitement, followed Percival with light, giddy steps, but someone suddenly grabbed her shoulder and pulled her back. The sudden force ripped her hand from Percival. Her eyes widened when she saw herself crouching to attend to her shoes. It's my laces, the Lucy before her eyes explained to Percival. He squatted, holding her gaze in his eyes while tying her loose shoelace. What in the world? Lucy was about to take a bold step forward and stop this lie playing out before her eyes, but a palm wrapped around her wrist and pulled her back. Again. It was at this moment that Lucy realized she didn't know who pulled her back. She was so shocked by the fake pretending to be her, while Percival just acted like the real her wasn't standing behind them. She turned her head, her eyes glowing with mana and rage. She would give this person a solid piece of her mind for messing up such a great moment. Confusion flickered in her eyes when she saw the man. He wore a wooden, featureless mask. One eye hole was open, and on the other perched a butterfly, its wings wide open like a book. That butterfly couldn't be real. On proper scrutiny, one could tell it was carved. This was an impressively intricate yet somehow grounded mask. His white hair, stature, and the gentle flicker of emotions in that eye she could see through the open eye hole made her shoulders drop. A name slipped out of her lips. Now. It was a soft whisper said with a confused face. Lucy wasn't sure. Was this Snow, or was she mistaking another man for him? It's me, said the masked man. That voice overlapped with his scream of anguish that certain night when he knelt at the entrance of his house, before his slaughtered family. The strength she had put into her arm to pull it out of his grip crumpled. All her guard dropped. We should find Percival. We can talk later. Lucy's brows came together. What? Percival is just there. Why should we? That's not Percival. I also have to be concentrated to keep that illusion reacting properly. It won't take long for that thing to discover the truth, especially when they're far into the water. What? Lucy snapped toward Percival, who was already in the speedboat with the illusion of her. That man was Percival. I'll explain to you what's going on, but not here, Adonis whispered. And how am I sure that you are real? She asked. Well, I won't put you in a spot where you would have to start doubting reality. That could expose the whole thing. The whole thing. You're in a town overtaken by monsters, Lucy. You can't see it because all of you are in an illusio. He paused as a tall man walked past them. Lucy frowned, staring at the man. She could see a man, but Adonis could see crimson shadows dancing off him. What kind of man had a protruding snout filled with fangs, digitigrade legs, a long tail, and stood over 8 feet tall in his shadow? There was no sun, but he was adept at illusions and spotting strange things after becoming one with snow. Space twisted. A wormhole burst open right where Lucy stretched toward. She grabbed him and they jumped into it. Both of them appeared in a comfy home. What's going on? Adonis sat down on a couch. Becoming one with snow cut me off from Earth's mana system, so I'm not limited like the rest of you. I'm already at the monarch tier, rising quickly through the ranks too. I think that's the only way I was able to discover this. He went to the window, pulled the curtain, and peeked. This town is crawling with half-men. I think they're all foxes. Look at them, moving through the streets with people. Some are even feeding on human flesh right at the corners of the street. Adonis's cheeks bulged, but he held back the nauseating feeling. Lucy looked through the window. All she saw were people and cars moving through the brightly lit streets. None of what Adonis said made sense, but then again, illusions were his forte. It feels like the world has ended in this town. Adonis muttered. So the entire town is cloaked in illusions. What exactly could be so powerful enough to do something like this? There's no way a demigod dungeon boss would be able to. It was a trial boss, Adonis interrupted. Trial boss? Lucy felt her heart shake. She knew what a trial boss was. It was becoming popular online. Demigods who had reached the peak had visions of where they would face a trial and end this ruination. Trial bosses are above the titled god tier, monarchs with ichor for blood. Now, what I never thought was that if the demigod failed the trial, those bosses could leave. When Adonis said that, Lucy grabbed his forearm. So where, Percival, somewhere somehow, when they had just entered this town and were looking for a house, they had been separated. Was Percival even still alive? Lucy's heart shook. Had she grown relaxed, thinking with her power she was now at the top of the world, untouchable. But now Percival may even be dead, and she had no clue. Adonis contemplated his next words wisely. I'm sure he's alive. Percival can't die like that. This is a full-blown invasion from the half-man race, one of the ascended races, and they're masters in the art of illusion. People need to stop accessing those trials because each failure puts Earth in a more precarious state. Have you been here all along? Lucy asked, still agitated. No, I've been running from an army of fanatics led by John. I have no doubt they're in Charlestown already. John is here. Lucy's eyes glowed with hate. They had to first find Percival. She was certain he had to be alive. Finding him before John found them with his fanatic army would surely give them the advantage. They might have the tier advantage, but John had the numbers, and being demigods or monarchs didn't mean you were immune to being ganged up on. But the problem was, how were they going to find Percival in a town with over 10,000 people? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.